Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Driveway Marketing Podcast. Today, I am with superstar and super relationship man, Kevin Thompson. For those of you who've been listeners, you kind of have heard me talk about our obsession with Dan Kennedy and Planet Dan, all things Dan related. And I don't think that most people know that the people you're talking to have been taught by people who are taught by people who are taught by people who come from Planet Dan, right? So it's like it's almost like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? So we should
Yeah,
call it seven
yeah,
degrees of Planet Dan.
yeah.
Anyway, so here's yet another edition of 7 degrees of Planet Dan, of my hopefully to be friend and certainly energy share, Kevin Thompson. Welcome, Kevin.
I'm honored to be here, Brian. Looking forward to this conversation.
And as always, we never where we're going to go, but we certainly know where we're starting. So,
Yeah.
I have to ask. So, if there was so what draw you in? So, for those of you, I've talked a lot in the podcast about Planet Dan. What brought you to Planet Dan? And if you remember, because I think you were predecessor to predecessor to predecessor, right?
Yeah.
We'd
So
love to hear.
I found out about Joe Polish back in 1995 when at the time I had a cleaning and restoration business. And I had worked for 7 years as a commercial fisherman to save up money for that. And I blew through $300,000 in the first year and I still wasn't showing a profit because I didn't know what I didn't know. Found Joe on a trade publication. Ended up investing in his help, started going to his events. I went to a seminar that he held, and Dan Kennedy was there. And Dan shared, and through that, I invested in Dan's magnetic marketing, got on his newsletter list, and ended up going to one of Dan's events in 1999, and Joe was there too. And so I got to meet Joe there, and Joe was totally shocked. He's like, Kev, you are my first carpet cleaner who's ever made it to a Dan Kennedy event. And so, yeah, that's how I got into Dan's world.
That is funny because a lot of people, and I think Dan uses the term, and I apologize, there may be an audio blip on that side, but we're going to assume that didn't happen. Um,
Okay.
the My internet was unstable. I think it's on my end, but anyway, that all fish swim upstream,
Yeah.
I believe, is what Dan used to say. And I remember watching one of the early info products from Dan where Joe was a speaker, and he's like, "If you use any of my stuff, I'm going to sue you." And Dan's like, "You're kidding, right? Because it's all my stuff you stole from me." Right. So, but so realize that, again, it's that relation. You had a relationship with Joe. Now, Joe, I'm sure transformed your business, right?
Oh, totally, totally,
Right.
100%. In 3 years, with Joe's help, we became a buy referral only company in 3 years, and it totally changed the game for
Isn't
sure.
it's crazy. And everyone's like, what's the secret sauce? Like today, what magic? No, it's called work. It's
Yeah, yeah,
People wear coveralls and don't like it because you get dirty when you do it every once in a while, right? But sometimes it's the end of, the brutal part of it is that there's some brutal stuff, but you got to build a great list. You got to have a good offer.
yeah.
And you got to have great connections. You got to have all that stuff. So, so what other cool relationships have you gotten from the world of Planet Dan? So, what are some other interesting? Because I think that's kind of the core of what I'm curious to know is like, we talked pre-call about this whole relationship thing. What are some other cool relationships that you can kind of attribute back in the day? You can Google 1995 if you want to know what it looked like.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, so I went, Dan used to host these seminars, like 3 day seminars, and he held a lot of them he held at the Embassy Suites on Camelback down in Arizona in Scottsdale and stuff. And in 1999, I went to one and you go to a dance seminar, it like starts at like 8 a.m. and it doesn't get over till 11 p.m. or midnight. Dan's of the mindset we're here to work. Y'all can sleep when you get home, And so,
Exactly. Exactly.
and, but that 1999 seminar, I met a lot of people, but two stand out. Yanik Silver, who at the time had just come out with this product, an online product he was selling called Instant Sales Letters. And Perry Marshall, who I don't even know, Perry was like in the tech space at the time, but later Perry ended up creating this product called the Definitive Guide to Google AdWords, which he launched that, and it was like perfect timing. He became the Google AdWords guy, and both of those guys to this day are still really close friends. And in fact, 13 years ago, when my wife came to me and suggested, we have 7 kids right now. 6 are our own, but we adopted one 13 years ago. She's now, in fact, she just turned 16 yesterday. And when my wife started talking to me about adoption, Perry was the first guy I reached out to because I'm like, Perry, I knew he'd adopted. And I'm like, my wife is talking about adoption. And I was just like all concerned about it. Perry helped me walk through it, and it has been an absolutely amazing experience.
That's
And
crazy. And I know Yanik and Perry are still at it. Yanik is not as visible as he once was. At least I haven't seen him in a
yeah,
while.
he's a little bit under the radar, but he's still doing stuff. He
Oh,
is
you know,
still
he's doing it for
totally doing
somebody or
stuff.
just making, and a lot of times, a lot of these folks that are coaches, they're just making money now. They're not necessarily coaching.
Yeah.
So they kind of get tired of coaching. And I know Perry's still very much on the scene because I have some
Oh,
friends that
he's
are in a couple
doing
groups with him right now. So he's very much still a part of the ecosystem of really learning. Right, we're all lifelong. As and people say, well, Bryan, it looks so easy. No, we're lifelong learners. I may have only learned that 10 or 12 years ago. And we were talking about the call and before the call, my passion with kids, because I'm like, if I had learned what I knew in my 40s when I was 15, it may have been a different, and I was still entrepreneurial, but I didn't realize that by working with folks who've already done it, you leapfrog. Like
that's right.
you just like, and I'm not talking, these are not baby steps. These are massive chasm
Yeah.
changes, right? So,
Yeah.
someone was asking me one time about, I was in the peak. And so, when Adam Whitty was when Adam Whittek is not happening today. When Adam Whitty owned it, he had the former CEO of Ford and Boeing, Alan Mulally. And
Okay.
so I was working with the kids. I couldn't see it, but I got to have lunch with him. And so I'm sitting there with my wife, and he goes, "Can I join you for lunch?" And we're like, "Well, you're the star of the show, so you can sit wherever the hell you want." He started laughing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Here we are sitting down with like in a conference room, back room with 25 other people having lunch with the CEO of Boeing and Ford, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, and then by the way, they're all regular people. And I
That's right.
my sales career, like I had a mentor was a boss's neighbor who was the basically ran procurement for Merck and Company, every single thing they bought. And he's like, Bryan, here's the deal. If you talk to an executive, there's only two reasons why. One, we have a problem. Two, we think you might have a reason, a possibility for us to get to that problem. And you're not going to be the immediate result, but we're working on 5 or 6 things, but you could be 7, 8, 9, 10, and you may take 30 and get it to be number 7 or 8 because we have a path to a solution.
Mhm.
So, but the only reason it did because we asked. So again,
Yeah.
it's and asking people. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't ignore that. I think a lot of people miss that point, right?
For sure. For sure.
So that's cool. So those are some. I mean, so Google those names because they are literally the grandfathers of all the stuff that's been happening. And what keeps you busy now? So now that you're out of the Kennedy business, you're not carpet commercial fishing sounds kind of interesting but tough. Carpet cleaning is also interesting but also tough.
Yeah.
So kind of fill us in on where you are today and kind of what your passion is about.
So, uh, meeting Perry and Yanik at Dan's seminar, it opened my mind to this because they were doing stuff on the internet, and I'm like, wow, what if I could use the internet for my business, and instead of just having a local reach, I could even have a nationwide or even a worldwide reach. And so I ended up starting this ugly website, probably the ugliest website on the internet, called Get Mold Solutions. And that was an extension of the cleaning and restoration business we ran. I started calling myself the nation's mold solutions expert. And within a short time, thanks to that website, thanks to technology, I was communicating more with more people on the subject of water damage and black mold and all of that stuff than anybody else in the industry. I built an email list of about 28,000 people that was nationwide, or excuse me, worldwide. And that website was producing about 15,000 a month for the business and stuff. We were selling mold test kits, mold cleaning product. We were selling informational products, and and Joe invited me in 2003. He was like, Kevin, he's like, why don't you come down here to the annual event and show everybody what you're doing with your website? And I was like, sure, I can do that. And he's like, and before you come, make sure you document what you do and how you do it. Put it into a course, because once people hear from you, a certain percentage of them, they're going to want your help, and just make sure you're ready to offer that to them. And so I did that. And I spoke at his event. Never spoke in public before, Brian. That was my first ever speaking experience.
You're not dead? You didn't die?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
just checking.
survived. I survived, and and it was far from perfect. And I was a little bit nervous for sure to start. And Chris, but once we got into it and the audience was engaging with me, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. They appreciate this. And at the end of my presentation, I just simply said, hey, if this resonates, if you feel like I might be able to help you, here's what the investment is. Here's what that looks like. And we ended up making $35,000 in sales of that course. And so the next year, April 19th of '04, I ended up selling the cleaning and restoration business. We moved into the publishing company full time, and over the next 12 years, we sold $16.1 million worth of that training, and I did it through doing strategic partnerships. Just, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, but what I had done with Joe was a strategic partnership. I had something of value that he felt his people would appreciate, and we just partnered up, and I spoke and shared with his people and shared what I knew, and it was valuable for them. And so together we were able to do something that neither one of us could have done on our own.
Yeah,
And
that's the beauty of those win-win relationships, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
again, I apologize if you're hearing weird stuff. My computer's gone bananas, so I
I'm
was
not hearing anything. I'm
that's
not.
great. So hopefully we can edit that out. But yeah, that's really fantastic because I think a lot of times the mid-market guys, right? So back when you were carpet cleaning, you never thought, I think today the term we would use is imposter syndrome. Like I would never dream I would be on stage, let alone what would I say and what
Oh,
happens if they don't like me, right? So this upper limit
totally.
problem, right? Of like what happens if someone doesn't like me? And now at least I am, and the people that we've heard from and my friends and colleagues in circle, it's like, what if they don't hear from me? Like, that's what's worse. Like, what if you can share? Like, what if you can show up and share? So,
Well,
that's
and I'll
amazing.
tell you that imposter syndrome, that is totally real. And the most successful entrepreneurs deal with that. And we hopefully we find tools and resources to help us, and just realize, I've got tools and resources I use that now I know I got the goods. I know I can deliver. But it wasn't always that way. It was not always that way.
Right, because we have to think about it. I grew up in the consulting and IT world where the job was, fake it till you make it, right? Because if I sold large enterprise software and hardware and, big 20, $30 million deals. And so they would be like, just the deals are so complicated, we can't possibly answer every question. So as long as I believed in the team and the product, I knew we could get to the finish line, but I couldn't tell you how we were going to get there.
Yeah.
And I had many colleagues that were caught in the weeds with like, what about this? And what about that? What about this? Like, I don't know, but I just know there's a problem. And I'm not the guy to solve it, but
Yep.
I know there's a right team of people early
Yep.
on. So people are like, well, you make it look so easy. I'm like, well, that wasn't an upper limit problem. I've been reading the Gay Hendricks book for like the third time where he
I
talks
love
about
gay
limit
music.
problem. So there's a book called the Big Hendricks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he talks a lot about we have upper limit problems. It's kind of a more psychobabble word for the in my mind, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Do I really belong here? So by acknowledging that, hey, I do belong here. I'm sitting in, I'm sitting in the boardroom with a public company with the CIO and the chief legal counsel when I was 27 years old in a business I owned, going, hey, Brian, can you come to the office? We need to talk to you before a meeting today. So I go to the office, and then they go, do you have a shirt and tie at least? You don't have to wear a suit. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I go in and I go to the boardroom of a public company, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And then they ask me the questions. I'm like, oh, you're asking me about that. No problem. So here I am literally talking to 3 board members, NASDAQ listed company, about my little solution, my little couple $1 million company just up the street. And then I realized, okay, I do, right? But it's so
Yeah.
hard to grasp, we don't deserve it, right? It doesn't matter the size of the business, because I was the size of us. We were a little company, we
Yeah.
just were a little, doing good things for lots of good people and helping lots of people, but it was still just your basic run of the mill small business.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very cool. And then are you still doing info products and training? Is that how?
No, no. So through that bit, I ran that business for 12 years. In that 12 years, I did almost 500 strategic partnerships, meaning that I partnered with other entrepreneurs, kind of like what I did with Joe, that helped me get my message out into the marketplace. And my way of like I really wanted to be valuable to my partners. And so I have this gift that I can just entrepreneurs can for one, I love talking with entrepreneurs. I love finding out what they're working on, what their challenges are, what their opportunities are, and depending on what they share with me, I just default to thinking about who do I know that might be able to help them with this. And
Right.
so I've been making connections like that for years. And and so that's one of my gives. And then the other thing through that process, over those 12 years of doing all those partnerships, I came to realize that I come to understand the real value of right relationships. And you know, the right relationships can be incredibly valuable. They can open doors that nobody else could open. It can lead to revenue that would never been able to be created. It can lead to impact that would have never been able to happen. All kinds of stuff. And so I, well, we talked about Perry Marshall. Perry Marshall. So Brian Kurtz and Perry Marshall. So Brian, 13 years ago, at that time, he worked with a company called Boardroom Reports with Marty Edelston before Marty passed away. And they were trying to figure out the Google AdWords platform. And they were pulling their hair out because that's not their thing. They're a direct mail company. They mail millions and millions of pieces of direct mail. Google AdWords, not their thing. And Brian was telling me, man, Kev, we are so frustrated with this. I'm like, you know, you should talk with Perry Marshall and his team because that's their thing. That's what they do. And he's like, you know Perry? I was like, I know Perry. Let me get you guys connected. Well, I connected them, and Perry's team did help Boardroom with the Google AdWords platform. But beyond that, the two of those guys became really close friends. And about 8 months later, they're hosting this event together back near Washington, D.C., called the Titans of Direct Response. And there was about 300 entrepreneurs in attendance at that event. Dan was one of the speakers at that event and stuff.
Yeah.
And
I have the info product.
you do have the info product from the Titans event? Yeah.
I'm not sure how I
And
got it. It was a bonus for something I got. I don't know what it was.
yep, I know they've offered that on a lot of other things now and stuff.
It's just
And
as valid today as it was whatever it was.
absolutely, absolutely.
The
And
the
the
method,
open
the media is different. I'm sorry, the placement is different, but all the other important stuff is 100%.
hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. And, you know, the first morning of that event, I'm getting text messages from about 3 or 4 of my friends, all essentially saying the same thing, but one of them came from Paul Bingham, and Paul's like, "Kev, I'm at this event that Perry and Brian are hosting, and they're doing opening comments from stage right now, talking about you in a really good light, that you were the guy who connected them, and this thing wouldn't even have happened if not for you and your role." And then Paul says, "Kev, one never knows where a well-planted seed will sprout." And that was what first got me thinking, Brian, wouldn't it be cool if I could have a business where I just got to do that all the time?
That's awesome.
And it took some time for that idea to germinate, and I was still in the publishing company at that time. But 2017, we had an opportunity, and another friend of mine pointed out, and I jumped on it, and I've been this been my full-time gig ever since, man.
That's
And
amazing. Yeah, yeah. So that's amazing because you think about it, right? Most, again, small businesses, mid-sized markets, whatever, you have this limiting factor. Like, I can't do that. No, yes, you can. Because,
yeah,
and I think that maybe you can comment on this. Is it a naivete of the CEO entrepreneur to like think that no one else wants to help, that everyone's trying to compete? I see it in certain industries where everyone's like, well, we can't talk because we're competitors. No, we would be, we if we both served a certain segment separately and maybe be in the same type of business, we both would be more successful. But I don't think they think about that. So what do you think about that question?
oh, that's totally people totally think about that from coming from that perspective of like, oh, that's my competition. And so I got to try to hide stuff from them. And I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, man, I want to do whatever I can to damage my competition,
Right.
and give us the upper hand and give us the advantage versus partnering and collaborating together and
Right.
doing far more together than either one of you could ever do on your own,
It
you know?
I've seen a change in my kind of personal perspective. I just tip my cap and saying they're doing great. Good for them. Like
Yeah,
that's also a hard thing to do. And
yeah,
you know, to celebrate their success
absolutely.
because they're
Absolutely.
doing something right.
Yeah,
And then rather than trying to steal what they're doing, why don't you emulate what they're doing to it potentially there's a lot of opportunities for everybody. I can't I grab every time I walk around I'm going to comment on what something you said about 5 minutes ago, which is entrepreneurs working with entrepreneurs. So my children who are becoming entrepreneurial but haven't quite figured it out yet are
mhm,
like, Dad, do you? And my friends are like, do you ever sleep? I'm like, I sleep like a baby. But when I'm working and I'm thinking, my brain is just going, it's like watching popcorn pop. But as I've matured, we all have financial needs, right? As I've narrowed down the focus, the business is growing and growing and growing because I can now put more of my energy on the same spots. And then especially for me, again, for the listeners talking about systems and processes, I literally have more time now to think about new stuff than I ever have in the last 10 years. And it's actually kind of scary because now I'm like, I can think much bigger than we we do AI virtual teams and we use automation first. We use virtual teams and we wrap AI together. So now all of a sudden things that took VAs time, cost money, US versus remote, we were playing that arbitrage. Now all of a sudden we've always done automations. I came from a tech CEO, so we've always had that advantage. And now we're wrapping this brain around it, and I get to spoon feed the brain of what nonsense is in my head. Now, training calls, instead of taking 10 hours a week, take 10 minutes. They're getting 40% better results. Our lists are 50% more effective. Like, wait a second. And they're like, well, oh, that must be amazing. I'm like, no, I had time to think because I got shit off my plate. And I gave myself permission not to be lighting fires and putting them out.
yeah.
And I gotta tell you, for the first we did a big trip to Italy in the fall. It was the first time I can ever remember being I've worked for myself since I was 27, I'm 55 now. It's the first time I've ever felt like I can walk away from the business and it's not gonna come back to me on fire. Now
Mhm.
I told my clients, listen, if it's something important, just drop a note, I'll deal with it. But if it's not important, let's it can wait till you get back.
Yeah.
Everything is still moving. And they all went, how was your trip?
Mhm.
So
Yep.
that was
Totally.
like, what a moment. My God, what a
Mhm.
moment. But
Yeah.
again, it's because I think I'm going to internalize what you say. I've now allowed myself to have relationships with my team and build trust in them. And by
Yeah.
the way, they also get they're listening too. You get roped to hang yourself sometimes, and sometimes you get a little,
Yeah.
you get a little correction because it's
Well,
like
it's some and you need that. You need that. You've gotta have those learning experiences,
can't ever learn if we keep jumping in and helping them out, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, if they're gonna drown and cause a client to leave, well, okay, that's another story. But if it's just a, a couple hour road noise or some other stuff, hey, listen, you're gonna have to fix it. But you have to have controls in place to
Yeah.
stop it before it goes. That's another story for another day. So all right, so we got to that. We're in the Titans of response. Now you're doing that. So so who do you most help? Who do you most serve? We talked about a pre-call.
So,
Who do you most serve?
I
Because I think that's really interesting because I've never met anybody who does what you do. So I'm just saying.
okay. I serve entrepreneurs who they're beyond the place in their business where they need to create cash flow for sustainability. They've already done that. So they are already successfully selling whatever product or service that they sell. I don't care what business or what industry they're in. I care far more about who they are. And so they're established entrepreneurs who are already making a substantial impact in the world. They want to make a bigger impact in the world. They value relationships. They understand that access to the right people. And that's what they want. They want access to the right people and they want it, quickly and easily. And that's what I provide. And on the other side of the coin, they have to be a giver through and through. If I let a taker into my inner circle and my inner world, that would be devastating. They have to be a giver, and meaning that they show up. They are hardwired to show up ready to contribute, to help, to serve, to pour into others. They couldn't show up any other way. That's just part of their DNA. They're hardwired that way. And when you get people together, when you get established entrepreneurs together who show up that way, everybody gets to receive in a really powerful way as well. And and it is just as easy to facilitate a relationship that is worth 1 million to 2 million to 5 million as it is to in fact, it's easier to do that. That is to facilitate a relationship that's worth 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. And so if I'm doing this, I'm like, I want to play a game worth winning. I want to play a game where I get to use my God-given gifts and abilities and talents to make a real impact in the world. So I focus on serving the people that I'm most valuable to, where I can make my biggest impact.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah, that's so cool. Such a different, this is such a different perspective than we've had before because we've been thinking small and now you're letting us think big, right? Because now all of a sudden, and I will tell you, I have a client in the industrial industry and he's grown through acquisition. And I was like, someone's like, are you going to sell? I'm like, I think I'm going to be a buyer. I never would have thought, like, I never would have thought, like, why would I want to, and we're, we're kind of pursuing the, could we do it? Obviously, we need to have the resources to do it, but how could we pull that off? And so all of a sudden, the game is changing because now all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, I've said we have a call center business. There's a lot of people struggling in that business because they don't know how to do all the stuff we do,
Yeah.
right? Find the right people, train them, make them part of a culture, make it like, how can you do that? It doesn't matter where they are. They could be in Poughkeepsie, they could be wherever. And so we're trying to figure out could we help more people in that area, right? So could we have more impacts in those ways? So it's really interesting to talk about it because I can honestly say I don't think I've ever heard anyone talking about this as a business model. And by the way, for those that are
Well,
watching this on some of the video stuff, you see there's a tickled look on my face. It's genuine. It's not bullshit. It's genuine. Like this is like I have the best job in the world, right? So I get to help people and I get to talk to amazing people. So I'm like,
yeah,
I literally have the best job in the world. So
I feel the same exact way. Well, I'm gonna give you an example because this is a really cool example. I recently got connected with this guy, Jim Sonfeld and stuff. And I had no idea who he was when we got connected. I found out in the process, and I come to find out Jim Sonfeld is the drummer for a band called Hootie and the Blowfish, which is they have the number 10 highest selling album of all time. And I come to find out through talking with him that he had wrote this book called Swimming with the Blowfish, Hootie, Healing, and One Hell of a Ride.
that's
And as
awesome.
soon as he told me that he had wrote this book, I'm like, man, I went to Amazon and I grabbed it because I just wanted to learn more about him. And it was a fascinating read, talking about his journey and his time with Hootie and the Blowfish and his battle with alcoholism and his addiction to cocaine and finding sobriety in 2004 and the spiritual journey he's been on ever since. And come to find out, he wants to do speaking gigs. And and during one of our conversation, he tells me, he's like, because he didn't even know what he didn't know. He's like, Kevin, he's like, I had a friend of mine tell me that apparently there is like events that take place, seminars, what have you, where they would pay somebody like me to come and speak. And I'm like, oh yeah, there totally is. You know,
There's a whole
and
and most people like you and me, if we want to speak, you got to get asked. They got to know you, but
yeah,
you have something that we don't have, which is actual celebrity,
yes,
right?
yeah.
So that's the difference, right? So
And so he's telling me, he's like, I would really like to get speaking engagements. And I'm like, Jim, why do you want to do that? And he's like, well, he's like, I just want to share my story and my testimony, and I just want to inspire other people, you know. And I want to show them that there's hope. There is hope, and they can make a big impact. And I'm like, that's really cool. That is really cool. I said, I said, I can totally hook you up, man. And Bryan, for me, that is the easiest thing in the world to do. You take somebody like him
right.
who's got his background and he, like I said, he's already established, he's already doing his thing, he's already, and now put him in touch with people who are the right people that would be like, oh, yeah, I'd like to talk with him. You know? and and so that's where, like I said, I want to play a game worth winning, man. And like that makes me feel good doing stuff like that. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have a similar story. I met someone at an event about 2 months ago. The guy was doing a drum thing. His name is Alex Simon. He's an MC. But then I'm like, okay, he's like trying to get the crowd all pumped up and doing all this stuff. And he goes, okay, people, I get it. Geeks with computers. All right, we got to change gears a little bit. So we find out later in the day, and I'm talking to him with darn breaks and stuff, that he was basically his counselor. He's like, this is what he told me. The counselor said, you're a hip hop kid in Cleveland, Ohio. You're not going to amount to anything. You better think about going to the military or going to work in a factory. He didn't want to do that. He was addicted to music and dance. Went to New York City back in the 2000s and applied for a cast call for this thing called Stomp. Ended up getting picked up for Stomp to do Broadway shows. Then
Okay.
it kind of, and then he said, and I guess they kind of moved people in and out of the crew to change stuff. Then he spent 8 years touring the country doing Stomp, the Stomp thing,
Wow.
and
Wow.
now he's doing the Stomp thing, bucket things, percussion stuff for events as an event MC.
Nice.
And he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, and by the way, yeah." He's like, "Oh, what are you doing next weekend?" He's like, "Oh, if you want to come to Cleveland, I'll hook you up." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Oh, I do like a third of the Cleveland Cavaliers home games. I'm the halftime show."
Oh, wow.
So I'm
Very
just like, so how do you get like, and he's same deal. He's like, I think I can bring joy through music and percussion and be an MC because it's different, right? So he's going the opposite way. He's just taking he's using grit to
yeah.
get there, but
Yeah.
he's got a unique selling proposition.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
many MCs you got up there that are bringing their drummer and their MC? Well, a lot of them do MCs now. I guess that's the thing, but bringing like banging on buckets and banging on bongos on stage
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
bunch of old fart guys and women. And the crowd was skewed a little older,
Mhm.
which I thought was hilarious, but it was good. It was a lot of fun. So I had a great
That's
time
awesome.
meeting with
That's
him.
awesome.
So again, proximity is power, as they say.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, cool. So I know I want to be sensitive to your time, and I know we talked about that. So if someone had one thing to think about what Kevin is about, what would it be?
So here's the thing. No matter who somebody is, no matter how big of a business they run, no matter how successful they look from the outside looking in, there is not a person on the face of this earth that gets too much appreciation. And by simply being genuinely appreciative of others, I will tell you, I've been doing this for 12 plus years now since a friend of mine pointed it out to me. And I go out of my way every day, just everybody in my life to show appreciation, let them know what I appreciate about them. My wife, my kids, the gal who serves us dinner, my clients, people, just entrepreneurs in my life, just anybody and everybody. And I'm just gonna throw a challenge out there because we all have cell phones with plenty of contacts. And for the purpose of this little challenge, it doesn't matter whether this is family, whether this is friends, whether it's business associates, what have you. But what I want you to do is take your cell phone and you send 10 messages to people in the next 24 hours. And in that message, you let each of those people know one thing that you genuinely appreciate about them. You don't do anything else. You don't ask for anything in return. You don't even ask for a response in return. You just send out some love and appreciation and you watch what happens. You're going to have such an amazing experience, and so are they. And you're going to realize that, dang, I was the catalyst for that. And I want a whole lot more of that. And you can have more of that whenever you want. And I'm not saying that we got to do this to 10 people every day. I want to kind of, 10 people in 24 hours. I just want to, do a confined thing so you get to have this experience. And from then on, I hope that it will just cause you to be like, you know what? I'm just going to start. I mean, I have opened up so many doors and so many conversations just by being genuinely appreciative, sending messages of appreciation to people who don't even know me because I saw something they put out on social media or in the news or in whatever. I just send messages and say, "Hey, I really appreciate what you shared there," and it's a phenomenal experience. And yeah, you will have an amazing experience with that little challenge.
So I'm speechless. I got goosebumps. Literally sitting here with goosebumps. I hope every one of our listeners has a chance to get some goosebumps too. Kevin, I can't thank you enough for spending some time out of your day. I appreciate you. I appreciate you beforehand. I appreciate a million times more now. So as always, thanks everyone for being a part of the Driveway Marketing Podcast. We'll see you guys on the next episode.